How are you guys feeling today? Good. Feeling good? Okay, good. So I feel like my back is always to somebody. I apologize. So today is going to be a very productive day, right? This is what we're focusing on. As Janine said, this is going to be action-oriented. Myself, with Gina Reichard and Tanya Stevens, we organized this session together. And we really just want some really strong outcomes to come from this, right? So the way that it's going to happen, Kimberly Driggins from the city of Detroit, you're the Director of Strategic Planning and Arts and Culture. She's going to speak first and let us know what the city has been planning, some of their vision, future vision, and some of the things that they're working on in the moment. And then Adrian Tonin, who is the nighttime economy ambassador and the customer service for Mayor Duggan's office. He's going to present about the Creative Chamber of Commerce and other things that he's been heading up. And then after that, we're going to kind of break it up, the discussion, into 3 sections. First will be arts and culture, which George Anamdi is going to introduce quickly for us. And we all know George. And then we're going to have Gina Reichard. She's going to talk about equitable arts development. She's just going to introduce the session. And then Sarah Triplett from Creative Mini, who's the Director of Public Policy, is going to talk about percentage for the arts. Each section only has 20 minutes, so that's why we're asking all of you to keep your comments and questions 2 to 3 minutes. So I think I'm almost out with my own 2 to 3 minutes. So I want to get started, and let's begin, Kim.
Hi, is it good morning still?
Yes.
It's good morning, okay. Good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Kimberly Driggins, and I'm with the city. I'm with the Planning and Development Department with the City of Detroit, Director of Strategic Planning / Arts and Culture. It is a mouthful. It is a bit of a dual role within the city. My background is really urban planning and community development. I've spent my career working in that space, but also really thinking and working with artists and thinking about how arts and culture can be an intentional driver for community development and community revitalization. So I'm very happy to be here today. I see a lot of familiar faces. Thank you, Janine and Ingrid and Gina and Tanya for inviting me to come out today to speak with you all. I'm a new Detroiter. I've been here 2 years. I can confidently say that. So a little over 2 years. And it's been this is a dynamic city, and it's a dynamic place. And artists really are the backbone of this city from my perspective. They've really, there's a vibrancy here in the city. Before people were investing that existed, it still exists, and really my job is to help make sure that artists are integral to the revitalization efforts that are going on in the city. And I'm just going to can someone just give me a wave when I've got 2 minutes left?
Right, just look at me.
Okay. The reason why my title is long is because there isn't an Arts and Humanities Commission or Arts Council. So there's not a dedicated agency within city government. And that's not always been the case. In fact, there's a long history of there being an agency or council for arts and culture. And that's one of my objectives, is to reestablish that here in the city of Detroit. Right now, it is resting within planning and development, and some of the activities are being spread out throughout the city. Adrian has a portfolio. There's also some work being done by GSD with murals. So I know one of the issues. So one of my key goals is to centralize the arts and culture activities. But before I get to the aspirational, I want to talk about what we're currently doing. And right now, we have a number of neighborhood framework plans that are in place. And some have been completed, some are ongoing, and some have yet to begin. Many of you know that we're working in 10 strategic neighborhood areas. And even though those 10 strategic neighborhood areas encompass about 50 or so neighborhoods, and arts and culture is a strong component that runs through most of those plans. A couple of examples of that: one recently completed, Grand River Northwest. That one has a strong arts and culture component with the Artist Village and Sidewalk Festival and the strong cultural assets that exist in the neighborhood. They were very key in a lot of the framework plan strategies, and we're looking at implementation. We also are working in Russell Woods Nardin Park, and Dabbles is actually part of the planning team. So he's actually part of the planning process. And that's something that we're moving more toward, is incorporating artists actually in the RFP and also part of the consultant team. That one has him on it. Campo Banglatown is also another area that we're working in, and working with the strong arts community there. And there's several, so I'm gonna speed it up in the interest of time. But arts and culture, historic preservation run throughout all of our planning frameworks. On a citywide level, we're doing some work as well. The Joe Louis Greenway, which is the green open space loop, that's about 23 miles. That RFP was just released earlier this week on Monday, and that calls out arts and culture. So it's a framework plan for planning for walkability and biking and pedestrian mobility, but arts and culture is actually a strong component. It's actually called out in the RFP. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. If folks are interested in looking at that, please do so. And we've also been doing a lot of work with Spirit Plaza, which is a new temporary plaza right outside City Hall. And I don't know if Michael Reyes is here, but he's been working with the Downtown Partnership. The plaza's been a partnership with our GSD, General Services Department, our office, and the Downtown Partnership. We contracted with We Are Culture Creators to do a lot of the cultural planning in the plaza this summer. And the whole intent of that project was to bring neighborhood arts organizations to the space and to make sure that folks knew that that space was available for free for programming, and to really promote the synergy of what's happening in the neighborhoods and providing a platform or a showcase for artists free of cost to work there. So what's next? I talked about a lot of projects. This administration is very project driven. However, I'm the director of strategic planning, and I have a very strategic citywide vision. What's on tap is a citywide, first ever citywide cultural plan. And I have a grant, and Herb Foundation is here, and Kresge. They have a pre-planning grant to look at development of a cultural plan for the city. The pre-planning grant is really focused on engagement and best practices research. And so we will be launching shortly that process, but I would imagine that all of you who are local that are here today will be involved in the engagement process. We plan on conducting focus groups, and it's really going to be, it's a citywide cultural plan that really is thinking about arts and culture throughout the city and the development. How do we leverage that, and how do we create the best municipal government support to assist artists? That's really the goal, and to really highlight and tie together all of the things that are going on in a very strategic way culturally for the city. So I know there'll be a lot of questions about that. I'm about out of time, but I did want to just end with that. Well, I actually want to end with Janine and Heidelberg, because I didn't actually mention that. We also have a number of projects, a handful of projects that are outside of the SNF areas that are really thinking about arts and culture and the intentional, like the cultural producers, the cultural icons that have been here. Heidelberg certainly is at the top of the list when I think about that. And we've entered into a partnership to really think about Heidelberg 3.0 and community development, and as they look to pivot, how the city and Heidelberg can be, have a strong partnership and what that vision looks like. So that is something that I'm really excited about. And we can talk about that. I know Maurice will be here tomorrow, and I know he'll touch more on that. But with that, I'm going to end. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. I'm sure everyone has one question. How do we stay informed, and how are we able to participate, especially with the cultural plan?
Great question. So Maria Galarza, who's not here today, she's my colleague. We've been doing informal meetings all summer, and we've developing a database, really email list of folks. But you guys, this group is actually really central to getting the word out. I mean, we are going to be working with community organizations, CDCs, arts and culture organizations to promote and advertise and make sure that the word is out around participation. So that's our job, and we will do, but we're going to lean heavily on a lot of the folks here to get the word out. And what was the other question?
How people can be involved in that process?
Well, the first process is really listening for us. And so the first thing is, and this actually is kind of, I guess, a soft launch because of the ideas and the way this is structured. Those are some of the key themes that have already emerged. So we're going to be doing the focus groups and the listening to think about what would go into a request for proposal. So this is fundamentally different than what we've done, what the PDD has done in the past, where we typically release the RFP and start the engagement. We're actually doing the engagement before we actually develop the RFP. So the focus groups, you're already in the process before the RFP has been developed, written, and released. So the planning grant is actually really strongly emphasizing engagement. So what you can do is come with your ideas, come with your critiques, come with your passion for what you do, so we can make this the best cultural plan in the country.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Just go right into it?
Go for it.
All right. Good morning. It is an honor to be here. Thank you for having us. I'm going to go a little bit back in history leading up to today, how I'm sitting in this chair. So I grew up on Schaefer and Finkel in the restaurant business. My family had Marinas of Detroit and the Red Devil. A lot of folks still know the Red Devil. But I always say if child labor laws were practiced, my family would be in jail, definitely. So it came up in as an entrepreneur and also in hip hop. I'm still in it today, own a record label in the city still. So as we were coming up, I worked with other administrations, but I went to DMC because I heard Mayor Duggan was doing his thing, and I walk into DMC, I see white, black, red, yellow, gay, straight, Jewish, Muslim, everyone there for the common purpose of doing good work. And I was inspired, joined the campaign where there's probably 10 folks in the campaign, really to push the mayor's ability to run the city, but also to customer service, how we serve each other, right? That's how we're going to be, how we're going to unify, how we're going to be a better city by working together. So started off as the founding director of customer service for the city of Detroit. When we first got in, it was about the lights, it was about response times, it was things that were necessities that we did not have in the city. But as a creative, I went through each department as we were looking at culture change and how we serve not only our external customer, but how we work together, our internal customer, to better serve. And we looked at process and whatever touched the creative community. So whether it was media services to where folks are going to get a permit or want to do a festival or whatever it may be, how do we streamline service? So really worked on those things. That turned into, we lost our film incentive. So there was a show called Detroiters that's still here today that came in. They were going to shoot Detroiters they were greenlit based on the film incentive, but we didn't have it anymore, so they were going to Atlanta or to LA to shoot Detroiters, which that seemed ridiculous, right? So Comedy Central calls and they get to me and they said, do you have something? I said, absolutely. I had a notebook of a few things, but what I did is everyone came in, from the accountants to the creatives to Comedy Central. I sat every department around the table and said, where can you save, where can you save, where can you save, where can you save? And everyone, we came up with this cost savings, and we called it the DFI, Detroit Film Initiative, which still stands today. But we asked, okay, we'll hold your hand, we'll expedite, we'll do all these things. But on the back end, we're asking you to engage our young community, our creatives in the neighborhoods. We're asking you to hire Detroiters. We're asking you to use Detroit businesses. They did that. They were the perfect model for that. Then we started doing with music festivals, where music festivals, great, you can go to Ford Field, you can go to LCA, all these great venues, but how about doing it in city spaces, in our parks? And we're going to do the same thing. We'll expedite, we'll cut some costs, we'll do this. But on the back end, how are you mentoring and cultivating and leaving something behind for the community, especially our neighborhoods? So that turned into folks starting to pay attention. And then Kimberly came in, so we're super excited about it. I'm like, okay, now we're on to something, right? So that turned into just really championing the creative community. And currently I serve as the nighttime ambassador for the city of Detroit. That came through the Detroit-Berlin connection. And there's many facets to this. So one thing is that we're very serious about, and this is the mission in my private and public life in a sense, is that creating equity and access for our young men and women in the neighborhoods. That chair can be empty right there, but coming up in hip hop and working with all these different ages and folks, that chair, they can see it, but they're not going to say that chair is for me. You have to be intentional about putting someone in that chair and saying that chair is yours. We work with many collectives, including these fine gentlemen here, Hooligan over here, that these young men have 1,000 young men and women standing behind them. We have 40 collectives from Crowd Freak to Hooligan to culture creators to all these different folks that are proving a music economy or a creative economy in the neighborhoods. The mayor is very, he's a practical guy. He's a guy that's just like, okay, music is great, but where are the jobs? I'm here to create jobs. So we're working with these young groups to give them access to the mayor's office, to get in front of the mayor and say, these are our needs. So that's some of the programs we're working on. We're also working with the state, public-private partnerships, Creative Many, all these different folks to bring and to unify folks to be one Detroit. Coming up in the creative, we tended to work in silos. That's our history. And that's why sometimes today, now we're all coming together. The international arts community is coming to Detroit, right? If we're not unified and working as one Detroit, people will go through us, over us, under us. If we're all together, no one can mess with Detroit, right? And we're gonna make sure, yeah, we can get a round of applause for that. Come on. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what this is all about, right? That's what this is all about. The Creative Chamber, so we got $400,000 from the state to convene the 12 sectors of creative. Some folks at first were very hesitant on this because it just is what it is, but eventually this is just a study that's gonna hopefully live somewhere else within either government or Kimberly's office or economic development, wherever it may be. But it's about convening everyone, asset mapping, finding out what the needs are, and then moving forward with different initiatives, public-private partnerships. As the director of Nighttime Economy, what's happening now is a lot of these venues are being displaced. Historically, what happens is creatives come in, they make a space really, really cool, and they're displaced by their own success, right? So how do we learn in history what's happened in other cities? So my big initiative right now is really working with venues. We have, Miami's been there 40 years, right? There's a developer across the street that built a beautiful, new state-of-the-art housing facility. Someone buys their $300,000 condo, God bless them that they can do that, but then they say, it's midnight and the bass is too loud, turn it down. That's not, listen, you knew there was a cultural asset across the street. If we displace that cultural asset, that's 100 jobs. And it's not just about the jobs of just the folks that work there, the dishwashers, the bartenders. It's the ecosystem of the DJs, the lawyers, the managers, the whole ecosystem of not just being the artist, the 100 folks standing behind the artist. So it's really working with the developer, working with DPD, working with the mayor's office, working with the city public-private partnerships to say, how do we all work together? Right now we're working on an ordinance that's an agent of change ordinance that as a developer, if you come in and there's a cultural asset across the street or within 100 yards of where you are, you have to have some sort of plan to soundproof your building or pay for the venue to soundproof their building. It's all about attraction and retention and attraction, right? We want folks to come here. We want young creatives to come here and move here and live sustainably. We're working with the land bank to somehow figure out a plan to figure out housing for creatives that they can own their money, because that's another way that we're going to preserve what our city looks like in 50 years. If we get all the young men and women from the neighborhoods to own their properties, to own their land, we're going to be good in 50, 100 years. It's going to be sustainable, but that's what we have to do. So with that said, there's a lot of great things working on, that we're working on, and Kimberly is leading all these initiatives. We're working with her. We're trying to fill the spaces that she's creating with folks that look like Detroit. So again, it's an honor to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adrian. And in order to work together, we need full transparency, right? And so that's the level of transparency that both you, Kimberly and Adrian, gave us just now. Thank you so much. We're going to build off of that and begin the conversation. We're going to have George talk about arts and culture for 2 minutes. George, just give us a little intro, and then we're going to break out, well, not break out, but I'm looking forward to your comments and questions.
Well, first of all, I'd like to follow Kimberly. She just did it yesterday, and she embarrassed me yesterday following her.
No, I did not.
She's such a brilliant person. But I did want to tell you something about, you said you've been here 2 years. Well, I've been here 42 years. You're never a Detroiter unless you graduated from high school here. Okay, so don't even worry about it. Okay.
Thank you. I'll just
So
get
don't
more.
it won't ever happen, right? They always come back, but what high school did you go to? Okay, but anyway, I'm George Anamdi. I have the Anamdi Center for Contemporary Art. I started it in downtown Detroit as the Anamdi, well, I started as Jazzonia Gallery. I started the art, how everybody talks about the art and culture, and well, my purpose, I'm trained as a psychologist, so my whole purpose for having a gallery was for our community's mental health. Now I'm not speaking of art therapy, I'm talking about the mental health of a community. And I find it very important that we have a connection to these arts. Because when you look at cultures that they're very strong in their arts and culture and their cultural traditions, they have less chaotic behavior that's happening there. Because the arts gives you a boundary. So that was how my motivation for getting into it, and of course it just grew and grew and grew, to where I am now. But I think one of the things I like to just say is that a lot of things are happening. I love what the city is doing. I've never heard this before. And I mean, not before, I mean, for any other administration who's really trying to focus on the arts. Of my experience, I knew all of them. I knew all the mayors personally since Coleman Young, and Coleman Young was the only mayor that knew the arts. Okay, to give you an example. But that was a different time too. But the thing that I want to kind of stress though is that a lot of times you want to start things and you want to see how we can with sustain, right? Everybody says, sustainability. Well, I want you to change that word to thrive. Okay, because if you can thrive, you pass sustaining, all right? So, but if you trip up on sustaining, you're out of the game, all right? But let's try to strive. But also, I think it's going to be very important, and particularly for the young, you got to, we cannot have a total reliance on the philanthropic community and the city to do this work, because they will change on you, all right? This is not a bad thing about foundations, but the foundations change their mission. So if you haven't capitalized on when they're here and use that as your springboard, not your being dependent, is very, very important. I started everything very independent. I don't ask for things. I mean, people give me things, but I don't ask for them. So that to me is one of the very important things in the cultural movement here. I do have one exception to, is a little, what you said about having housing and all that for the artists. I sometimes think it's okay to displace artists. Because, I know it sounds crazy, but because I think part of the artist's mission is to always go and explore other areas. If an artist gets too comfortable, and the next thing, that next gen, see, it's like getting them comfortable is fine. Okay, but there's another young generation. We need artists to keep moving. So if you look at it nationally, you look at Soho, you look at Wynwood, the artists change it, but at the same time, it builds up the community. But the artists sometimes go to places where it has a certain angst to it. They're not just going like, oh, okay, because you can go out to Southfield or, Troy or something. Just got your nice house with a garage, and you turn your garage into your studio, but you don't want to do that. You want something that kind of drives it. So I just say that, to say it's not to help the artists, not at all, but we don't want to have this reliance on the artists. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And so how, what does that even look like to not have reliance on the city or on foundations? And if you want artists to be moving, that means we need a strong market, right? We need to be making money so we can move, right? In New York, they move north to the Hudson.
That's why we're starting, we're doing a project called the West End Gallery District. We're on Grand River, and we want to have a series of galleries because we need a whole gallery district. So when visitors come, you have galleries that they can visit to and not have to go, 20 minutes between spaces like of the city. So that's what I think is very important. That's what we need to have. And again, with the foundations, they give a lot of grants to the artists, but until you have an economic system here where the artists can really sell their work, get them, it won't work. It's like the gallery, the venues, all that, the music venues and all the galleries, all that makes a difference for the artists in the long run.
Awesome. So, comments, questions? Who wants the mic? No one.
I'm thinking, but I can get to something. So Kim, when you talk about the city doing a cultural plan, I feel like different groups of people have different definitions for what culture is. So when I think of our cultural institutions, I'm like, oh, that would be the DIA and adjacent properties. But when I think about what the culture of Detroit is, it's very different. It's Black, but very different than the institutional stuffy spaces like the DIA. So how are we getting to what our definition of culture is when we do a cultural plan?
That's a great question, Lauren, and that's really going to be driven by you all and the engagement process. I'm not coming in with a prescriptive definition of what culture is, but it's also, we're going to also be looking at best practices around the country around cultural plans, because what Adrian talked about around the creative economy, that's actually something different than what I'm talking about around a cultural plan. They're related, but they're different. And it's really thinking about, one is the definition. I've done this in DC, and we spent, when the RFP was released, we actually spent the first part of that around the definition of what culture is to the city. So that's actually kind of the first step, is actually defining what it is for the city of Detroit. And that is not something that a consultant will drive or I will drive. It will actually be driven by community engagement and the artists that are living here.
All right, so speaking for the youth, because it's only probably 5 of us in here on hand.
Are you little youth?
Well,
Kind of grown me.
20s. We see and understand the inequities and the unevenness in the city, and we want to help, but we don't know about things like this. Like, I had to work and partner with Heidelberg and Keith and Iron doing Holla to be even able to have this type of opportunity. I understand, there's cost structures and everything like that. Like Namdi said, artists are nomadic. I haven't spent all my years here in Detroit. I lived in New York and California, as well as brought my brother out there to be able to experience that as well. And we've seen these cities live on top of each other. And we know and understand the potential that Detroit has. But we feel as though there's a missing link in a generation between connecting with us and what we got going on. I know we're in the hood doing what it is that we love to do, but it's only because most of us fear stepping outside of our comfort zone. I remember there was a time I didn't want to leave the east side of Detroit just because it's all I knew and it's what I loved. And having the experience of going downtown to my high school, which Detroit School of Arts, it allowed me to experience downtown because we didn't know what that was. I wouldn't have known what downtown was had I went to high school down there. which was my neighborhood school. But appreciate the fact that I got a mother that like helped keep me in the arts. I guess the question is how can the youth get more involved in strengthening the city's cultural infrastructure? Just as well as this, I kind of shed tears yesterday. I'm gonna share that with y'all because seeing the plan of Heidelberg 3.0 on a screen, like with architectural graphics and everything that like is in a dream of what it is that we desire as like a youth for our city. It amazed me because it's what we're working on too. So it's like how can we all work more together? So this is more even. You feel me? Just like and these chairs are, of course, you know, like filled in with different faces, all ages.
Awesome. Does anyone want to answer that from the city? Or, Janine,
No, actually,
you wanted to comment on?
I just want to say that this is the start. And you must talk to your young folks and tell them that Heidelberg is a base. It's a landing ground. It's where young people need to come. And the space is outdoor. So I just want to say that. You know now, so you spread the word. The other thing that I think is important to share is that we have to look at all of our brothers and sisters. Caucasian, Indian, so forth, because Detroit is a big melting pot. And if we leave people out, see, this needs to be a new revolution, a way where we're really learning how to embrace everybody. But the culture here in Detroit, historically being African American, has not been appreciated, has not been embraced. We're starting now, we want to change that, but we must also embrace all of our brothers and sisters who are here trying to do this work. It's important, because if we don't, then that creates that separation. This is fine, it's good, but when we leave out of these doors, people are going to their own corners of the world unless we put that conversation on the table real and raw. We have to embrace all people. I want to say that.
Shahida Maisni Johnson was the Arts Council Director for a while. And she had this really wonderful way of planning events throughout the city so that people can learn about each other's cultures and move throughout the city and move into different neighborhoods. So again, this is why an Arts Council is so important, because as we're moving forward, we want Detroit to be so strong. The diversity is our strength, and being able to actually connect with each other and learn about each other, that's our future. Do you want to?
Sorry, thanks. And Kim, with all due respect, I live in Chicago, and Chicago's gone through a number of cultural plans, and a lot of people have been critical or confused about them. And it kind of made me a little anxious when you said you're going to go around the country and gather best practices from elsewhere. And I don't really know what that means. It sounds pretty abstract to me, and I think you can get from everything that I'm learning about creative people and feral creative people in Detroit for the last couple of days, that I think the best practices, the shaky practices, and all the things you need to discover are probably right here. But feel free to tell me what you meant by that, and if by going around the country to get best practices. I hear best practices a lot, and back where I work, we try to do worst practices and test that out.
I mean, best practices is, I mean, for us, one, I mean, it's both. I mean, it's actually, you need to know what has happened, and that's really the structure, the process, and really learning from successes and failures. So that's what I mean by like best practices research. So it's not, you know, I'm not going to physically go around the country, but it is a scan of what is taking place right now, what's current, there's a lot of things that I've actually seen. Oakland has just finished a cultural plan. Boston has done a cultural plan. I think that part of it is about thinking about what works, what doesn't, but it's really being driven by what's happening here. But I don't want to develop something in isolation. I think context helps, So that's really what I mean. It's not that it's gonna drive what we do here, but think of it as just factors or attributes, and whatever one does, I would hope that you have a view where you're looking at how to develop the best possible product, and in this instance would be cultural plan for the city. And I think that it's a useful input, but it's not necessarily a driver.
I agree. Just to add to that, we've had the opportunity, to be in Berlin, Amsterdam. We have actually doing the keynote with nightmares around the world to in Australia coming up. And some of the agent of change, some of these ordinances that other more vibrant nighttime 24-hour economy cities have lived. We are getting knowledge that, but again, we're Detroiters, we're innovators. We're going to go out, we're going to seek knowledge, but we're going to come back and we're going to interpret it our own way, and we're going to make it ours. But it is very important so we don't make the same mistakes, because those folks that have made mistakes by whether it's displacing or whatever it may be, we don't want to repeat that, and we have to just learn from others. I think that's exactly what Kimberly was saying.
Awesome.
Yes, good morning. I'm going to offer a disclaimer since I've been doing double duty trying to manage this little person. So if it has already been asked or addressed, can you just give me the cliff notes? But my question is, pursuant to the cultural plan, first, is it a cultural plan that is sanctioned by or at the behest of the city, meaning the mayor's office? And if so, what is the vision, given that the mayor is not specifically a mayor in support of the arts? He's much more, I think the point was practically based, more about jobs and commerce. And then secondly, or perhaps I should stop there, because I just want to know the answer to that question, because it'll impact whether or not I ask the second one.
I'm going to stack the questions because we're running out of time, and then you can stop.
Okay. Hello. I also have a question based on what Tony was saying. I'm a Detroiter. I left for 8 years. I came back and I saw things that changed rapidly in Brooklyn, in places that were very similar to Detroit, industrial, DIY spaces, venues, and the displacement and the development that quickly overtook that. And so returned back to Detroit to foster and grow and help the creative community become more sustainable or thrive and become economically strong. So I wonder what the development of the Arts Council looks like in terms of a timeline. What does the process look like to get that? And then what are some of the key programming elements that might be a part of that? I mean, even Lansing has an Arts Council. I mean, such small cities compared to Detroit have this already in place, and I think it's pretty embarrassing that we don't have it yet. So the urgency is there for me, and I think everybody in this room, to know kind of when is that moving forward, because there's been a lot of meetings and ongoing conversations, but actionably speaking, what is the next steps? And then also physically, outside of the construct of a council, to make some of those decisions through the greater community, is an arts district or a gallery district or something like that also on the roster for spatially within the city, and how is that being determined?
Well, those are three major questions. It's gonna take like 30 minutes. So I'll do my best. Again, I'm gonna give a high-level answer. You guys can talk to me during the break about details, some of which I actually don't even have. So to the first question about, is the cultural plan sanctioned by the mayor's office? It's being done by the Planning and Development Department, my department, so I guess yes. I mean, it's the mayor is gonna know about it. He knows that we're doing it. He knows that we have a grant, so I don't know how else to respond to that question. I work for the mayor, I work for the city, so it is something that the city is doing. To your questions, let me see if so to the timeline for the Arts Council, I can't give you a timeline. I don't have a timeline for that. That will be discussed when we're talking about the cultural plan, and that's something that through my informal conversations over the last 2 years has been front and center, and I would imagine through the continued engagement will also be front and center. So hopefully a timeline for that will emerge during this engagement process. And to your third question around cultural districts, we're not, at this time, those are happening independent of the city. So what George talked about is something that he sees for his area. It's not something that the city at this time, again, this might come out as a recommendation from the cultural planning process, that we do cultural districts. I have to say, they're a little bit of a mixed bag. I think that a lot of times, my sense is that they're best when they're a bit organic, or that they're driven from folks like George. And there has been, or seemingly like a bit of a clustering of cultural organizations already in the city. I think there could be more intentionality around that. But cultural districts have specific meanings around tax breaks and incentives, and that's something that would be a financing issue as well. And that's something that we would think about if folks are interested in the cultural planning process. So the short answer is, we're not doing cultural districts. The city is not doing cultural districts at this time. However, we are strengthening cultural assets that are in communities in the neighborhood plans that we're working in. That's not the same thing, but we are definitely looking at strengthening cultural assets and cultural facilities in the neighborhoods that we're working in. And
So I think we're kind of already in the second segment. We're like full in this idea of equitable development. So I just want to pause there for a second and set up some framework or some key talking points that can get us through the second segment. For one, I think that this idea of, I think in a lot of ways the city is playing catch up to the arts and culture community. And I think part of what we as the arts and culture community are hoping for is more, which it seems to be coming, again, more than ever, recognition. Recognition of the value and the path, the legacy investment, and the role that a lot of people in this room have been playing for a long time. So it's great to hear that people see George Nnamdi and what he's doing as like leadership. And I think without question, we're all looking for things like resources and policy decisions and incentives that push this work forward, but also give us, put us like on that level playing field. I think most of us in this room see that what the role of arts and culture has as much, if not more, value than developments like Little Caesars Arena, for example. And that we've all, we have been doing this for a long time, beyond the 32 years of Heidelberg. It's sort of like what gives the city its identity, and a value that's not measured in terms of economic development departments or even markets, definitely not real estate markets. So I think we all need to start asking, it seems to keep being put back on us. We ask questions, it gets put back on what, get ready. So in terms of action, maybe what we should leave this room with today is some way to figure out how we want to communicate back to the city, that we can all share more ideas, resources, intergenerational support, and what does that look like? Is it a Facebook group? I hope not. Is it more meetings like this that we just, the first Saturday of every month, just show up, same place, same time, nobody has to organize it, there's not admin heavy, I don't know. That's what I would like to use part of this time, this next 15 to 20 minutes, is to talk about what are we going to do to be involved in this process. A process that's not yet defined, a process we're all still waiting for, that, if you hear my voice, it's because we're anxious, I feel the same urgency and anxiousness. And, but I think it's this willingness to show up on a cold, rainy Saturday morning and say, we're here, we want to do this, how do we do this? When can we do this? Are we going to do this now? So, I'm in the mode of let's us figure out how to do this, but also what are the communications that we can do, and what organization, knowing that artists hate meetings, I hate meetings, like how can we do this our way, but keep plugging into whatever system is, regardless of what the system is that's defined. So.
Awesome, thank you, Jane.
Let me say something real quick. I think what Kimberly said about the city can, or government, or even foundations cannot develop this for us. Arts have to come very organically. If you talk about best practice, you go to any city, and it's never done, it's never led by the city. The arts in itself lead the way. Developers don't lead the way. It's the art, the developers follow the arts, okay? The artists don't follow the developers. I'm gonna tell you that now. I think the only way I can kind of straddle both worlds is because people think of like, you that art guy, you know, when they talking to me in development meetings. That's an art guy, you know. But anyway, I think that's very, very important that we have to take responsibility. You come here, we can meet, and it's like, what the hell, what you mean about? You know, get in there and do your craft so you can sell what you do. That's very important. You gotta sell your craft. You gotta take your craft, what you do, to all these different levels. And that's, so when you be able to sell things outside of Detroit and live in Detroit, that's when you're gonna start making paper. You're not gonna make it just trying to, oh, we got a building here. You should be trying to make that so much money, you don't even wanna own a building. Because you're just so rich, you don't want to have that headache on you. Okay? Walmart doesn't own their buildings. Myers doesn't own their building. You see what I'm saying? It's like you don't have to, but to focus on your craft and getting that out. I mean, yes, it's good to have a meeting and all these things, but it's like you got to understand you can spend a lot of time here working on these things, but it's difficult.
Wait, and 1 second. Okay, guys. Love you all. I do. It's just, I already passed the mic to someone that I really think would be a wonderful addition to this conversation. Please, your room.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Gregory Reed. I represent artists and understand what you're doing. And I was a part of a group like this. George and I, we like pioneers. That's the reality. We just go do things. I formed and founded the Detroit Entertainment Commission. There were only 8 in America. And we became the 9th one in this city. And so I was a part of a group just like you in terms of how to put together the Entertainment Commission, since I specialize in intellectual property, arts, corporate and entertainment area. And so there was a task force. This is just like a task force, really, committee. And we said, well, how did you get this off the ground? And so I'm not a meeting person, I'm just a doer. I just go out and do things. Then you gotta learn how to work within the system, which I had to learn how to do, although I have been around the political arena in some way or form and fashion, but I learned how to work within the system. So Kwame Kenyatta had an interest in the arts and the entertainment area. And so he had a task force committee, and a lot of people were doing things, but they were not vibrating at the level that I wanted to do, and I was a part of that committee, and I withdrew from that committee, and I went together and put together the plan. And see, now the energy is so much more resonating at this level where we get a lot of artists coming to Detroit. So there's more workers and doers among you. So I went back and I studied all the commissions and see what was happening. See, there's been the entertainment commissions. New York has one. San Francisco came after Detroit. Austin, Chicago, Atlanta, all those are commissions. And then you look at them, you start studying, and you see why are those cities vibrating so much? New York built theirs off the Hollywood. After the theater. LA built theirs off the Hollywood Walk of Fame. That's a commission. That's how the Walk of Fame, the stars got there. So I started studying and seeing what was there, and I put together a plan, just like what you all are considering. And I gave it to Kwame Kenyatta. And I didn't go to any more meetings. He studied that plan. So you got to find a council person as well as the city to work within the city. Just like this, I don't know your name, I'm sorry. Kimberly, thank you, I appreciate that. So you have to learn to work within the city, since the city is a part of what you're trying to do to impact the community. So I gave him that plan. About 8 months later, he called me back. He said, you know this plan that you put together? He said, I'm gonna push this forward for you. That's what happened. He put the plan, then he went and sold it to the council people. And then they voted on it 100%. All of them said no nays, gave 100% of what I put together. And then they said, well, who is going to actually implement this or chair this? Then they said, well, he's the only person that got the skills and the knowledge, because I had written books and things all on this type of material. Then they said, well, we're going to make Mr. Reed, we're going to make him the chairman of it. So I chaired it for 6 years. That's how I got in that position. In terms of it, I'm still part of the commission. I'm not the chair now. And at the same time, they needed legs to stand on it. And so then we have to educate these council people who actually didn't know anything about entertainment law or anything about that. They had to become educated. And so this is what you're doing. You're educating the council people as well. Thank you. But that's how you have to get it off the ground.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that process. I think that was very helpful. Kimberly?
I know that we're behind in getting into the breakouts. I'm here. I just want to be clear though, because I think we're having a conversation, but there's different threads or themes of the conversation, and I just really want to be clear. Government, we have a responsibility. I'm not advocating that. The responsibility is around policies that are not there, and the reestablishment of the Arts Council. So I just want people to be really clear about what I am saying. When I said that it's better left, I was thinking about the organic nature of where arts and culture appears in neighborhoods and communities. That's what I was saying is better left to be organic. But around policies, around systems, that is certainly our responsibility. And to Gina's point, we are playing catch up to where you all, there's been a lot of thinking. There's been more thinking about this then I'm overwhelmed actually by all the interest and the thought. So we're getting it together, small steps, baby steps, but we're committed, and I just want to make sure that people understand that in this room, that it might not be at the pace that you would like, but I'm not going anywhere, and we really want to make sure that it lands that is authentically Detroit, and that involves all of you, so thank you.
Just real quick, I just want to, I'm going to get real and just say no one hustles for you like you hustle for yourself, right? So I'm talking away from government. I'm in the private sector. I think what the responsibility of each and every one of us, we're all on this hustle, right? We're all in this to make it, to make money, to do whatever we can do to have our platforms thrive. But it's about reaching out and intentionally cultivating younger folks to inspire them, so we build this community that when developers come in, when government comes in, that this is a creative culture that they have to work with, because we've created something bigger than anyone could go around or under or over. So I really believe that it's about just what we do every day, because we get so busy, we forget to reach out to each other to work together, and we end up working in silos. And I think that's why we are where we are in Detroit, is because we were on such the grind that we did not become this tight-knit group. And that's what we have to do every day. And it's bigger than a meeting. It's bigger than one person. It's bigger than one organization. It's about being intentional.
Thank
so
you.
That's
Thank
what I
you
wanted
so
to say.
much.
Thank you.
And to be fair, the cohesiveness usually happens with the Arts Council. It just always goes back to that. So now we're going to move on to percentage for the arts with Sarah Triplett from Creative Living.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I didn't know my voice was going to be scratchy. So I just wanted to say, yes, again, my name is Sarah Gonzalez Triplett. I am the Director of Public Policy for Creative Many Michigan. I think a lot of you in the room know my colleagues at Creative Many who are artists and creative practitioners themselves. And so for the work that we do, that makes us deeply invested and committed to the work that we do on behalf of artists, and that's really to listen to them, to understand the barriers, the needs, and trying to see what we can do from the programs and the practices that we provide to assist in solving some of those issues. And so for my work as the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy, this is so nice of you, I do our advocacy and public policy, and that's at the federal, state, and municipal level. And as we all know, is that all politics is local. And one of the things that we're hearing more on a statewide basis, really I'm hearing from multiple communities about the need that they've moved past this trying to understand and appreciate arts and culture within their community. And they've gone into a place of, yes, we understand and we want to take the next step. But trying to answer that question, how to do so in a true and authentic way, making sure that artists are a part of that conversation is really the area that we're trying to help assist in local municipalities. And specifically in the city of East Lansing, one of the things is that I think that this is something that a lot of cities go through, and that is the need for sustainable funding for the arts. And through that is specifically for the Percent for Art program is a lot of the process was it really was through volunteers and ad hoc, people who wanted to do certain, sculptures, put in public art in various ways. It really was reliant on ad hoc work of volunteers in order to do that. So there wasn't a continuous process, there wasn't a planning. So trying to figure out how do we solve that? And at the time we did have a Percent for Art fund. We had a public art fund available. And an arts commission, a long-serving arts commission. And so with that, we wanted to build on the current framework that was already there. So generally, Percent for Art programs, it's 1% of general funding that from public development really goes into some sort of Percent for Art fund. In the city of East Lansing, yes, we did that as well. We did that 1% for art from public development and improvement projects. But we went a step further. What we did is that for private development, we also, for projects above $500,000, that private developers were asked to contribute 1% of the funding, but we had a cap. In order to actually pass the ordinance, we have a cap of $25,000 from private developers. And private developers, in order to give them a little bit of flexibility in where that funding goes, they can contribute in 3 different ways. And so one is that it goes into, the private developer can say that I want to have I want to have public art on my own property. Another way to contribute is saying that maybe it's not something that they want to do, but they want to contribute a piece of artwork, and that goes to the city of East Lansing. They can define what it is, and they can place it on public property somewhere within the city of East Lansing. And the third way they can do this is donating, and this is the way I like the best as a member of the Arts Commission, is they can strictly donate that $25,000 directly to the Percent for Art Fund. And that way, the Arts Commission works with the Fine Arts Commission to determine what that money can go to. And so some of the money that's been built up right now is that the first project that we're actually doing through some of the money that's just strictly been donated is we're installing our very first project right in the middle of East Lansing, and that is in Valley Court Park. And it's being done by this amazing, actually a recent student. And that it's a $50,000 project that's going in. But I can tell you outcomes. This is just, the ordinance was passed in 2015, but it took a while to work through, to start to bring on developers into this project. So since about 2016, it's more than $200,000 worth of public art has been installed in the city of East Lansing. And that means that's only an annual contribution from the city of $10,000. So you can see how that $10,000 investment in the city really does leverage huge dollars. So for that, it means right now there are 7 projects that are currently under review. We have 11 completed projects, and that's everything from apartment buildings, that is a daycare, a dog kennel, we have in parks. I mean, we have public art that is sprouting up everywhere. And that I think that there are a couple key things that are next steps for us and that have kind of jumped off from having a percent for arts ordinance. I think one thing is that what we're seeing is that as RFPs are being developed, that we are getting a lot of the same people who are submitting their names to the RFPs. So I see a desperate need for a statewide database of artists. And I think that also we've had a current conversation, and this is something that making sure that we're allowing for payment for renderings of what the final product is going to be, to make sure that that's included in an RFP. And that signage, I think that's something when we're talking about a percent for arts ordinance, it's important for the city and for our citizens to understand how these pieces all connect and how they have been supported by those funds. And then for us, as we talk about, cultural planning here, it's really allowed us as a city to understand that we have a big responsibility with going from having very little funding to having a little bit more opportunity to do some real investment in artists and in public art in our city. So what are we doing to maintain those funds? So that we are actually developing a cultural plan.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I have a quick question. With a percentage for the arts, would that be going into our city charter in Detroit?
Yeah, right.
So the reason I asked that question, the reason I asked that question is because right now we are voting on candidates, if you're a Detroiter, for the Charter Commission. So if you don't know about the Charter Commission, the city charter is the thing that basically spells out all the rules and ways of working in the city, right? And we really need to make sure that we have some things in place while the Charter Commission is working, right? So they're going to be elected in November, and I guess that means they're going to be instated in January. So as the cultural plan, my question is, as they're revising the city charter, and we're not necessarily organized with our arts council or arts and culture, like what's going to happen with that? Because it feels like there's a extra urgency to get things organized as much as possible so that they can be part of the city charter.
I'm not sure, because the percentage for arts program, that operates really differently. I don't know the Lansing program, but it's not typically the general fund. It's usually the capital improvement program that is a bond program. In most cities, that's if it's 1% or 2%, it's usually around the CIP, the capital improvement plan. The city actually does not have bonding authority. I'm having a little difficulty seeing a percentage for art program, like in terms of what you'd be. The city's not in the capital market. It's not. We don't have a traditional CIP. Like we're 5 years post bankruptcy, so I think these are issues. So this is where the innovation comes in. This is where, when you're really thinking, that's not to say that the city can't have a public art program, but actually how it would be funded. At this moment in time, it would look a little bit different because, again, the city is not in the municipal bond market. I'm getting very technical because I think the facts and the transparency, it matters. However, we have a road bond and we're doing streetscape improvement, and we actually are thinking, our third-legged stool here is philanthropy. So with everything that we're doing in terms of implementation, there actually is a philanthropic ask, and that's what the SNF, the Strategic Neighborhood Fund, is actually all about. What we've been thinking about in the planning department is actually around the corridors, and actually thinking about how can we, as we're thinking about the actually investment in the streetscape, what does the arts and culture play there? And we're actually thinking about developing a grant proposal that would actually fund arts and culture on our commercial corridors where we're actually making investments. So that's actually something that's actively going. So we don't wait for a plan to be done. This is flying the plane while you're building it, and this is why I started my presentation with all of the projects and some of the RFPs. We're we're not just waiting for something to be done. We understand that things are happening and you have to respond in real time. So around arts and culture, and then there's the signage ordinance, which Greg Moots, my colleague, has been leading, which actually is looking at arts and culture as well. Some of you might have been on that steering committee or that talked about that. So we're actually thinking about public art and how to get more public art into projects, but a percentage program is not something that we're developing because we actually don't have the ability. Oh, the other thing that I mentioned, that I didn't mention that I should, is the community benefits ordinance. That's actually another way to actually get art into projects, is that with all of the projects that go through a CBO process, that's a community-driven process, and the benefits are what the community defines. And so there's no reason why arts and culture can't be part of the benefits package, but people have to be there. So one of the things I want to say is that it's good to organize, but artists also have to be in the other conversations that are happening in the city, because there's actually a lot of ways to influence and push the arts agenda that is outside of like a dedicated agency. And that's really what I've been trying to do, is really thinking about how do we infuse arts and culture and all the things that we're doing until we have an entity, because that's building the plane while you're flying it. So the CBO process, there have been a number of those, and there's more on deck. They're looking at revising that language to make it even stronger, and I think that there's an arts and culture play there.
Yes.
Something about the percentage for the arts that just like conceptually I think is really strong, is that it's asking the development projects to give back to the city as a whole, especially in this era of like there's a lot of co-opting of arts and visual language that gets monetized, and then it's like, you know, for the business community, it ups their brand, but there's nothing given back to those on the ground, the artists who are doing the work to create the cultural core of the city of Detroit. And so the philanthropic community is great, but I don't think that, it's back to that equal playing field thing. I don't think that lets the business community off the hook for reinvesting in the greater good.
I don't either, and I think that a percentage for arts program is a strong program. All I'm trying to say is the reality of where the city is to actually implement that program. When you're not in, like, I'm just talking about the barrier right now, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't aim for that and shouldn't go for that, but I'm talking about actually the reality of what you would actually be bonding. The way that I know them to work, it's around the capital improvement program, which, like I said, we're not in the capital markets. We don't have a traditional capital improvement program. Detroit is different. That's not to say, again, I think the CBO process, it's actually the same principle around what developers have to give back to community, like in their projects. And again, there's no reason why arts and culture can't be that. But I'm not recommending, this is a decision that you all would have to make, but I want to be, for a percentage of art program, it would be, and as Ingrid said, through the charter, a change in the charter to actually implement that, to actually create that and implement that. So
Yeah, so it just kind of, it just feels like, what is the action step? Because it feels like we're in a huge gray area, and if the charter is going to be reviewed all next year, shouldn't we be having something to add to that, or educating the people? I invited the candidates here so that they have some sort of understanding of what our needs are. I don't know if anyone, is any candidates in present? Yes. Okay. But it just feels like we need to be a little more clear and a little more action-oriented and move forward a little faster, since we're at this point. This really critical point.
Right. Yeah, and I understand, different municipalities work on things in different ways. I can just share the way in which East Lansing went about doing this, because this was an ordinance as written by a few individuals, taking a look at over 2,000 different percent for arts ordinances, and again, learning about what are some of the challenges that other people had. I think Ann Arbor is a really great example of some of the challenges that they had. They had a percent for arts ordinance for a very long time, and they had almost $1 million, I think, in their percent for art fund in order to distribute. But because of some of the challenges and how they were distributing the money, or trying to make sure that they were aligning the funding with specific areas in which entities in which they received those dollars, that it made it really unattainable, and people saw this giant, well, I shouldn't say people, administrators saw this pot of money, and they were like, absolutely, we're gonna use it to fix roads, we're gonna use it to do other things. So it's really important to take a look at the budgeting process, and that's why we specifically went about things in the way in which we did, to make sure that that pot of money is not gonna languish there. And so we're actually using it every year. And the other portion of this that I wanted to mention was that our process was to develop this ordinance. It went through the city council. Thank goodness we had a very arts-friendly mayor at the time. And it was voted on by council and became an ordinance of the city. And this is something too, that our percent for arts ordinance, we say, it's public art, yes, but there's also different portions of it. It's enumerated out by percentages. A portion of public art specifically, it goes down to festivals and fairs, performance art. So there's many different places in there, and that it was crafted in order to really serve the artistic community in East Lansing.
I wonder if we could create a group to investigate this, because it feels like there's many different ways to create a percentage for the arts beyond having a bond. So, I think that we need to really focus on that, because it could be a really wonderful way to support the arts and culture here in Detroit and help fund artists and their projects.
I just want to see your point on it. Absolutely. We did one of our first, before Kimberly came to the city, we had there was names that were for an arts council that were, and the mayor looked at it and said, these are the same names. We want folks that are boots on the ground. We want some of the millennials. We want folks. So that's kind of pushed to the side a bit. But timing is of the essence, and I think with you planting the seed today, with creating a group to talk about this, and working with Kimberly and different folks in the city, is what we should lead with today. That's the tangible first step today.
Awesome. Who wants to lead that up? Any questions, comments? There it is.
Just a very quick question, and forgive my ignorance if this already exists, but when we were talking about how we get the word out to the young people, is there a plan to have a website dedicated for the arts where they know where to go to find out about things? Because they're not going to go to the city's website, that's a given. So is there something that we can create that is plugged into all the high schools in the city, so every kid in the schools knows if there's something I am doing that's art related, I can plug it up here. If I want to find out about what's going on, I know where to go. Because communication is vital. If the kids don't know about it in a way that they are amenable to seeking out the knowledge, they're not going to go searching for it.
I think that is when it comes down to us creating that, and I feel like there's a lot of different places to look. It is unfortunate there is not one hub, and that's why we need the Arts Council so badly, so that we can create that calendar and create that one place for people to access. The portal is so necessary. You're squirming.
I mean, it just seems like what I'm hearing is that there are a lack of, and obviously, right, we came out of bankruptcy, there's a lack of resources. A lack of resources does not allow people to strive or thrive or move forward, even in their grassroots initiatives. And so I think what we are all saying here is that we hold value for the city at large and internationally and nationally. And because the city is in such a unique position, we've always been forward-thinking and innovators and leaders, that I think that either despite the lack of resources, some entities or organizations or people need to find a way to provide those resources and then distribute them so that the people who are on the ground can continue to do their work independently if that's what it takes to keep moving things forward, or that we need to be recognized for the value that's already here and find other ways that are maybe not financial resources but are other opportunities or ways in which to uplift that and showcase the value that we all hold in this room in every diverse way, because we have an opportunity to be innovative and lead the national conversation on how arts like Heidelberg and all the other institutions in the city can make this shine and really turn a page. And if we are not viciously fighting for that, then people are looking to this city in that way, and the value is there. It needs to be recognized and somehow pushed over that, because it seems like we're kind of stuck.
Yeah, hi. So I apologize if this is not particularly articulate and particularly fleshed out. But on a couple of points, I think that we're coming here as artists, and some of us as artist presenters, already really, I'm going to speak for myself, already really tired from the sheer amount of work that I do all the time. I can't speak for everybody here, but I'm going to assume that the nodding faces. So we need to really buy into how important it is to be part of this this effort right now, and really sign on to that, knowing that that's another % of our time and energy that's going to be put in. So I'm curious about the other way, the creative ways. I hear you talking about, Adrian, about creating housing for young artists, so they can own their homes, own their property, own their studio space, so that they then can put their energy into other things. Like, what are some of the creative ways we can go about accessing resource that isn't even necessarily money that's designated for the arts? What are these other avenues within the structure of a city that can go to support the culture makers?
So I'm going to stand up now, and I'm going to make a couple comments that I think are really, really, really important. These processes do get draining, don't they? And we wonder where we're going. And it's really difficult. But I think a few key things were said from Greg, and one of them is we need to do our own cultural plan. That's an interesting idea. It's just an interesting thought. We don't know what it's going to look like or what it might mean or anything like that. That's one thing. The other thing, this idea as a percentage for the arts, that's an idea that we don't need permission. This is another idea where you just have to start doing some things, okay? I want us to remember as creatives to put the creativity into the ideas, because remember, we're coming down off 100 years of industry and a particular way of doing things, and that's the way the city of Detroit does things, the way it's always been done. So what we are charged with as creatives is looking at new ideas, looking at new ways, and looking at new processes. And one thing that I want to say in terms of making more money for the artists, let's start that rumor. The rumor is that Detroit is the place to be buying art. Start the rumor. It is the greatest marketing strategy that you need. Just start the rumor. Have you heard that Detroit was a place to be buying art? No, I didn't hear that. Spread the rumors. Start making things happen on our own. And remember, we don't need to look to everybody else's process. We could throw something on Kim's desk and at least give her a starting point and say, okay, look, I can work with this. We can devise our own plan. But we have to be focused, and we have to be energized, and we have to think about the end result and not just our own individual space, right? So I'm challenging us as a directive to be greater, to think about an action item that you can do, that you can add to, and to start a damn rumor. Detroit is now the place to be making or buying. We already know us to be making. I started that rumor. And now we're making art all over Detroit, right? Now we got to start the rumor that says Detroit is the place to be buying great art. Okay? Those are my only comments, and I'm done. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Janine. All right, so Detroit is the place to buy art. I am going to hand this to you but you are the last comment.
Gosh, thank you very much. And just bravo, Janine. And I was kind of thinking in a sort of a similar direction, not quite as creatively as Janine, but this issue about arts and support for the arts and artists is something all over the country, really. Detroit has no corner on this. But I'm impressed as I look around this room about how many people are here focusing on this. And the thought I had about this was, if the arts community in Detroit were to be a cohesive community coming out with a kind of cohesive voice, and I don't mean one point, but something that people could get behind, there is significant foundation support for the arts, and I don't mean to disagree with George. I completely agree with him, and I think philanthropic support is changeable, and you don't count on it forever. But the Ford Foundation, for example, has set equity, cultural equity, equity in education. Equity is an issue that it is focusing all its grants on in whatever area. And they're talking about not small projects, but really large projects. They want to make an impact. And Detroit is a place where an impact could be made. It could be something that would really affect not just Detroit, but be a model that could be an influencer, could radiate through the country. And if there were a collaborative effort to come to a cohesive voice, to go to a foundation like Ford, and there are others, but I just think of that because I think Darren Walker, the president there, has a strong commitment to the arts and a stated commitment to equity. There's only one other time in the history of the Ford Foundation when they have set one goal, and that was during the Civil Rights Movement. And they're looking at the issues in this country now as requiring equity among the people, the cultural and other areas. And I just kind of suggest that one thing that might be done is to kind of set a goal of coming up with a plan that could be presented to the Ford Foundation, a multi-year, multi-million-dollar plan. I mean, it's just a way of focusing energy to say, if we were to do this, what would that look like? And if people who have an interest in that being a kind of a feasible idea and would meet and talk together over, it wouldn't be one conversation because you really would want to pull in and kind of think this through carefully, but thinking of action plans, one of them might be, what could we do through philanthropic support in a really significant level that would help this community to have a cohesive voice? What would the parts of that be? And in my mind, they would be you guys and your buddies, doing things all over the city and the rest of the city knowing about it, and you knowing about what's going on in the rest of the city. And one of these, a copy of this ending up on Kim's desk and her saying, oh, hooray, this is an idea that we can go with, or this is an idea we could work with, or something like that. So setting one goal, a plan, my suggestion would be, a multi-million-dollar, multi-year plan for a proposal to the Ford Foundation, but it doesn't have to be that, but something that would provide a cohesive direction with a goal at the end.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's a great format. And all right, so we have a couple things on the table. We know that a cultural plan is being developed right now with Kimberly Driggins in her office. She's basically reflected back onto United Artists of Detroit to be the place to share the information of what happens. but we will still need to know when you're going to report back to us and let us know any progress that would be happening. And then maybe we can organize another roundtable to have that conversation about, because I think staying in touch with the artist community is like the best full transparency we can have. And so we would really invite you to come again, you and Adrienne, thank you both for sharing, and to share with us again your progress and what's going on. In terms of the artists, we invite all of you to join the United Artists of Detroit. We have a Slack channel, and for those of you who do not know Slack, don't be intimidated. It's an app. You just download it, and we will put information on Facebook under the event page, so that then you can know what's going on, when we're meeting, any updates. The reason we chose Slack is because it's low admin. So please don't get mad at us for choosing this. But we literally want to be as productive as possible within the capacity that we have. If somebody, it's an app, Slack is an app. United Artists of Detroit. United Artists of Detroit. If you have any questions, Facebook me. And what else? I think that this was there were a lot of great ideas. When we do gather, perhaps we can gather and develop that cultural plan that both Mimi and Janine were talking about on our own, and we can really flesh that out. I understand that's time and energy that we will not yet again be compensated for, but I think it's really worth it at the end. And I think it's really important. As I stated before, elections are in November. If you're living in the city of Detroit, please get to know your candidates, and please start asking your Charter Commission candidates, hey, what do you know about arts and culture? What are your thoughts? And
What's a plug for the candidate? Yeah.
oh, there's a plug.
For tools.
Sorry, yeah, for anybody who's interested, please visit our website, creativemany.org. We sent out candidate questionnaires specifically on issues related to the creative sector. So we were asking candidates their specific opinion, and so that it can help inform those of us in the room here today and our colleagues, our vote. And also there are 2 specific memos on there that relate to just the background on both of the gubernatorial candidates. So it's a what would happen if either of them were elected, kind of taking a look at their background. And they both responded to the candidate questionnaire in some way, shape, or form. So that's going to go out on Monday with all of the refreshed questionnaires.
Awesome. Thank you, Creative Minnie. That's really helpful.
I'll post on the
Okay, and we're going to post that link on the event page, Facebook event page. My charge to all of you is to tell and talk to all of your art colleagues. Not everyone could be present, we got lives, but if you could please spread the word about what you've heard today, that would be really helpful so that the creative community can stay informed. That's one of the major issues that we're facing right now. I would know something, Gina might know something, and then we come together like, what's this? So, we really want to make sure that everyone is on the same page, everyone is informed. So that is my charge to you. That's the most immediate charge that we can have. Thank you again, Kimberly Driggins, Adrienne Tonens, Sarah Triplett, Gina Reihart, Georgia Namdi, and of course, wonderful Janine, for having us and hosting us. And this was a wonderful conversation. Thank you again. Have a good day.